Hey, what's up? Eric here from My Endurance Life, and today's training video is 5 simple ways to make this your best year of ultra running so far. And make sure you watch all the way to the end because each tip builds upon itself. And at the very end, I have a special bonus tip for you that can literally save you years of trial and error off your ultra running journey. And each tip has multiple tips within itself. So if you want to pause and take notes, that's totally cool. But tip number 1 is slow your roll, especially new runners or road runners coming onto the trails for the first time. Running fast too soon is the fastest way to get injured. Try to keep most of your runs slow at an easy conversation pace, able to run and talk and carry on a full conversation at the same time. If you have to pause and take time to catch your breath before you can start talking again, we're not talking about just getting a sentence out here and there, but able to carry on a full conversation without needing to rest and catch your breath. And remember, the longer the race you're training for, the slower you're going to be going. A 50K is a lot different than a 100K, and a 50 miler is a lot different than a 100 miler. So might as well get used to that speed on your training runs. Just remember, go out, have fun, run at a conversation pace. There's no reason just to hurry up and get the run done with. There's a time for speed, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's just not at first. During this first initial phase, you're building your base, really getting your muscles and your joints and building that bone density so you can run faster and longer, leading up to like steps 4 and 5. So again, remember, running fast is the fastest way to get injured. So make sure to establish a solid base before introducing any speed work. Instead, try this on tip number 2. Tip number 2, hills pay the bills. Instead of speed work or intervals, do hill repeats instead. To make this your best year of ultra running, work on increasing your VO2 max by doing hill repeats instead of intervals. We want to do hill repeats instead of speed work or intervals because it's easier on the body because of the less impact that it does. Running uphill is less impact on our joints and our bones and our knees and all that. So especially if you're newer to running or coming back from an injury or a break, we want to do hill repeats instead of speed work. Another reason why we want to do hill repeats instead of speed work or intervals is because it's easier to get our heart rate up and push hard compared to flat ground speed work or track workouts. Believe it or not, most new runners or average runners don't actually push hard enough during their speed sessions to get the full benefit for their heart rate training compared to a hill repeat. So how do we do it? We want to find a hill that's long enough to where we can run up it for at least a minute. A hill that is steep enough to be challenging, but not so steep that you will have to walk before you get to the top or before you reach that minute. And before we start, we always want to warm up. Get a 5 to 10 minute warm up. Make sure you've elevated your core body temp to where it's comfortable to run hard. You're nice and loose to where you're not going to pull anything, and then start your repeats. Run up the hill at about 80 to 90% of your max effort. This is still going to get your heart rate up, but it's going to keep it, on that edge to where you're not going to trip and fall, hopefully. And then do this a couple times a week, probably once or twice a week, depending on your fitness, for about 30 minutes each session. Once you get to the top on each hill repeat, make sure you walk or jog back down the hill. We don't want to run down the hill. We want to give our time for our heart rate to recover, getting back into that conversation pace before you start your next repeat. Hill repeats are awesome, but you want to make sure you don't want to skip the next type of run I'm going to talk about in tip number 3. As boring as they sound, they are very important. To continue making this your best year of ultra running possible, don't skip your midweek maintenance runs. So tip number 3 is midweek maintenance runs. What a lot of people do, and I'm guilty of this also, is our midweek runs, we just go out and get it done because we know that we should or that we have to keep improving our fitness and just to get the mileage in or the hours in for that week. But once I started applying this and I started recommending this to the athletes I get to work with, not only did my running get better, but their running got better too. Use these midweek runs to work on form, focusing on your foot strike and just proper form and technique that will help you when you get into your long runs, especially for tip number 4 and tip number 5. During the midweek maintenance runs, these runs are typically going to be in that zone 2 level, a conversation pace. So instead of just going out and knocking out a 6-mile run because you know you have to, really focus on just maybe running for an hour instead of running for 6 miles. It will help you take that pressure off of running fast and allow you to really focus on staying in a conversation pace and focusing on your foot strike and your technique. Another thing that we can do is, especially depending on the time of year you're running, you can work on eating, you can work on drinking, you can work on hydrating, you can do a sweat loss test during this, especially if you go out for an hour. I have another video on how to do an at-home sweat loss test if you want to look at that. But make these runs practice, make them count for something. The next two tips I'm going to give are probably the most important tips of the whole training video. So make sure not to cut it out early and watch this to the end, because I have a bonus tip for you that can really help you go further and faster than you ever thought possible. Tip number 4 is train according to your race. So hopefully you've already signed up for a race, and if you haven't, then this might not apply to you, but typically people who are watching this video have already got a goal race in mind or will sign up for a race eventually. So tip number 4 is do the math for your race. I use an example for a 50K. If a 50K has 5,000 feet of elevation, divide that by 31 miles, which is 50 kilometers, and it comes out to an average of 161 foot per mile. So practice on doing this. Find your average foot per mile and work this into your maintenance runs during the week. 2 to 3 times a week should be optimal for getting you ready for that race after you've already established your base, once you're getting more specific towards your training for the race you're signed up for. As much as we don't want to admit it, we do a lot of walking and hiking during our trail and ultra running, especially if you have goals for that 100K, 100-mile race, 50-mile race. That the better hiker you are, the more efficient and faster you're going to be at actually finishing that race. So set a day or 2 or 3, aside during your training to go out for a hike and just get really efficient at hiking, learning when to transition from walking to running to hiking and then back. When you're running downhill, practice on working on quiet feet. The quieter your feet are running downhill, the less impact you're having, the less likely you are going to get injured. So maybe set a day aside where you just practice on running downhill. What goes up must come down, especially if you have a high elevation race like the one described above. I'll never forget this because it was like a huge aha moment to me when it happened. I was training for a 100-mile race, and I was doing back-to-back 50Ks, a 50K on Saturday and a 50K on Sunday. And this was the second day of the 50Ks where I had coursed out a 6-mile loop in the trails near my house. And my wife wanted to come out and join me for the last 2 loops of the last 50K I was doing. And so I was more than happy to have somebody out there and finish this with me because I was beat. I was tired. And I was running up this hill, and I look over at my wife, and she's hiking next to me, carrying on a conversation. And I thought to myself, like, maybe I shouldn't have been running up this hill the entire time. I probably should have hiked it, because if she can hike just as fast as I'm running, that's going to save a lot of energy. So practice. See if some hills are easier to hike up and faster than running up. Practice it. You might surprise yourself. And we're almost ready for tip number 5. The last tip that I'm going to share with you is a true game changer in making this year and your future years of trail and ultra running the best year to date, and probably the best races you might have. So make sure you keep watching. Tip number 5 is next. Tip number 5. This is a game changer. This revolutionized the way I train for ultras. Every ultra, especially the 50-mile and beyond distance, I create a loop or an out and back that is very similar to my race. So according to the same lines of tip number 4, where you do the math, create a loop that is very similar to the race profile and elevation change that the race is that you're training for. The great thing about this is you can simulate race conditions and the specific race you're training before you even get there. Working on your all-day pace, learning when to hike when appropriate, when to walk, when to run. And the number one reason why I started creating loops or out and backs that are very similar to the race elevation profile of the race I was training for is because I could work on my nutrition. Different courses and different elevation changes require different nutrition needs. So create a loop that is very similar to the elevation profile of your race. It doesn't have to be exact, but just close. This way you can see the demands that your body needs when you start getting hungry. So I like to create about a 5 the 6-mile loop, because that's about the average distance between aid stations, and then go out and do it 4 or 5 or 6 times, depending on the length of the race that I was training for. If you're training for a 50K, do it two or 3 times. If you're training for a 100-miler, turn it into a 50K. And then each time you finish a loop or the out and back, create a makeshift aid station, whether you're using your vehicle or a park or a trailhead, or if you can create a loop around your house, use your garage or your driveway. This way, when you come back, you can practice aid station efficiency, learning how to fill up your water bottles as fast as possible, having everything ready to go, emptying out the trash out of your vest, putting nutrition back into your vest, and eating while you're there. One of the things I like to do is look ahead to see what the race I'm signed up for, what the race organizer is going to be supplying at the aid stations. That way, on these practice loops, I can see, okay, they're going to have this type of chip, they're going to have this type of solid food, they're going to have pretzels, they're going to have pickles. And then I can test this and practice this during these loops. That way, when I show up on race day, there's no surprises, and I've already practiced my aid stations in and outs probably 4 or 5, 6 times by the time I even go up and start the race. So if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel, because I love doing these tips videos and helping you become the best ultra runner possible. So make sure, keep watching the end, because I have a special bonus tip that's waiting for you. But practice with real food and race nutrition, or both, when you're doing these loops. And I'm sure you would agree with this bonus tip. The fastest way to reach any goal is to surround yourself with people who have already been there and done that. That way you can learn from them and apply it to you to speed up the learning curve. When you join the Mind Endurance Life team, you will get access to myself. I'm a USCO Ultra Running Certified Coach, but I also bring in today's top pros and athletes and other coaches, physical therapists, and legends of the sport, so you can learn and ask questions to them and apply to your own personal training in real time. And team members get immediate access to the entire Mind Endurance Life training library for free. I give it to you as a special perk for when you sign up. So you get all of my training guides from a 5K to 100K. They each come with step-by-step videos that will answer most of your trail and ultra running questions. And believe it or not, the unfortunate truth is most people who want to join the Mind Endurance Life team forget. But so go there right now. Don't forget, it takes less than 2 minutes to sign up for the team and become a team member and get access to all of the training videos. So I look forward to seeing you on the next call. Go to mindendurancelife.com, click on the tab that says join the team, and I'll be seeing you on the next live training call with myself and a super inspired, motivated team that's just going to cheer you on every step of the way.